In this video, we're going to be looking at part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. We'll be looking at a couple of sample questions and answers for this part of the test. Now, part 3 of the test is probably the most challenging part of the test. The examiner's going to be asking you some questions and you will have to answer them straight away. These questions are going to be a bit more complex than the questions you get in part 1 of the test. They're going to be asking you to give your opinions on something and explain those opinions. It's a bit more complex than the part 1 questions that just ask you to talk about yourself. But there is no need to panic about part 3 really. A lot of students worry a lot about this part of the test and panic about what topic's going to come up and whether they know a lot about the topic or not. Now, there's no way of predicting the topic. And also, there's no reason to panic about this part of the test because by the time you get to part 3, the examiner already has a really good idea of the band score that they are going to give you. They're just using this part of the test to confirm what they already think or kind of make you try to show some things that you haven't shown already in previous parts of the test. And the questions we're going to look at in today's video will show you how the examiner is doing this. Of course, it's difficult to predict the topic that could come up in this part of the test. But there are some common topics that could come up, but this is not really the issue. The style of questions that come up are quite similar, and we'll see 2 different styles of questions in today's video. The topic we're going to be looking at, and that I've chosen for the questions today, is the topic of films or movies. And it's a topic that has come up in previous tests. But again, we can't really predict this. The questions you get in your speaking test will probably not be on this topic. So let's have a look at the 2 questions that I've chosen for part 3 in today's video. So the first question is, do you think films have changed since you were a child? So you can see this question is on the topic of films, but also it's asking you to compare the present with the past, how something has changed. And this is a really common type of question that you will see in part 3 of the test. It's getting you to show some skills that maybe you haven't shown in previous parts of the test. One, the skill of comparing, and also the skill of using different tenses in one answer, which is not an easy thing to do for most students. But of course, we'll look at the sample answer for this in a bit. So that's the first question. And the second question is going to be on the same topic, but a slightly different style of question. Let's have a look. As the technology for home viewing improves, do you think people will stop going to the cinema in future? So you can see this question, again, is on the topic of films, but it's not really asking you to compare the present with the past. Here, the question is asking you to predict the future. Something that nobody really knows. So remember, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but there are good answers and bad answers. Good answers explain your opinion well and show that you can talk about the future. Again, here there's a focus on the use of tense. They're checking that you can use different verb tenses when you give your answer. And this is quite challenging, more challenging than the type of questions you might get in part 1 of the test. So now we've looked at these 2 questions, it would be good to look at at the sample answers to these questions and look at how they're showing off these skills to compare the present with the past and also to predict the future. So let's look at that first question and then see the answer as a whole, and then we can break it down sentence by sentence and I can explain why it's a good sample answer that a Band 9 level student would probably give in the test. So the first question, if you remember, was, do you think films have changed since you were a child? No, I don't think films have changed much since I was a child. When I was younger, I enjoyed watching action films, and the Hollywood formula for this type of film seems to be the same today. For example, I like the original Superman films, and superheroes are still a popular subject for filmmakers. So there it is. That's the answer. It's not too complex and not too long, but also not too short. It kind of fits the question. It's an appropriate length of answer. I sometimes find that some students struggle to find the right length for their answers and go on for too long. And maybe some students give answers that are too short. This would be an appropriate length here. You can see we have 3 sentences. Now let's have a look at each of those sentences and how they're answering the question. So if you remember, in that first sentence, I said, no, I don't think films have changed much since I was a child. So it's quite a short sentence and it's giving a direct answer to the question. It's making sure we start with a nice, clear, direct opinion. We've used the word no. It's nice and direct, a nice simple way to begin this sentence. Then we've copied part of the question, really. I don't think films have changed much. We're copying the grammar of the question. We're using the present perfect tense to describe a change over time. I don't think films have changed much. So we've copied words and grammar from the question again to give our direct answer. But we've made sure we've used this phrase since I was a child as well. So we're using different verb forms. We've used the present perfect and past simple, since I was a child. So that's a nice, clear, direct answer in the first sentence. But it's not enough. We need to show a bit more than this. In this part of the test, you need to show off your skills to explain your opinion a bit more. So we have a second sentence. Let's have a look at that second sentence in a bit more detail. When I was younger, I enjoyed watching action films, and the Hollywood formula for this type of film seems to be the same today. So you'll notice here this sentence is a bit longer, and we're mixing verb forms a little bit. When I was younger, so the past simple, I enjoyed watching action films. So we've used the past simple form of enjoy. We've put ed on the end of that verb and made it clear in our pronunciation that we know that we're using that form of the verb. This sentence is really just explaining the first sentence a bit, explaining your direct answer and contrasting the past with the present and why I don't think that it's changed much. It seems to be the same today. Here we're using the present form of seems. We've got an S on the end of the verb. You could just stop your answer there, but you'll see in my answer, I've given a third sentence. Let's have a look at that third sentence and see what we're doing in it. So, third sentence, for example, I liked the original Superman films, and superheroes are still popular, or still a popular subject for filmmakers. So you can see here this sentence is giving an example, a nice clear example to kind of explain what I was saying in the previous sentence. Again, we've mixed the past with the present. I liked the original Superman films. So the past form of like with ed on the end, and making it clear with our pronunciation that we know that there's an ed on the end of that verb. But we've contrasted that with now. Superheroes are still a popular subject for filmmakers. We've got the verb are. Okay, we're using the present tense. This is not an easy thing to do, but it's what the question is requiring of us, to compare the present with the past. Nearly always you're going to get a question like this in the third part of the IELTS speaking test. It's really common that the examiner will test to see if you can do this, because it's not easy, it's quite challenging. But again, if you practice comparing the present with the past and get good at doing that, you can show off this skill when you're in the test. It's not really about the topic, because the topic can change. We don't know what topic you're going to get when you go into the test, but we know that you're probably going to get a question that has this style. So, there we go. That was the first question, comparing the past with the present. Now let's move to the second question. Now, if you remember, the second question was, as the technology for home viewing improves, do you think people will stop going to the cinema in future? No, I don't think that people will stop going to the cinema. People can already buy fantastic home viewing equipment, but it still feels more special to share the experience of watching a new film with a theatre full of people. I don't think that technology will be able to replicate that cinema atmosphere. So that's the answer. Again, you can see here, it's not too long, but also not too short. We've actually used the same number of sentences here. 3 sentences. This doesn't mean you have to always use 3 sentences. But it's a good kind of rule to remember to maybe make sure that your answers aren't too short and they're not too long. And again, we're going through similar steps here. The first sentence gives a nice direct answer, copying ideas and vocab and grammar from the question. Let's have a look at that first sentence. No, I don't think that people will stop going to the cinema. So really there, again, we're giving a nice direct first start to the question. The word no, again, being nice and clear and direct, but it's not quite enough. Then we've gone on to copy the ideas and words from the question. I don't think that people will stop going to the cinema. So it was a do you think question. So we've used the word think in the answer. We've used that in the present tense because it's what I think now. But then you'll see we've copied will from the question to show that we understand it's about the future. I don't think that people will stop going to the cinema. We've copied that phrase, stop going to the cinema. We haven't worried about paraphrasing. There's no point in worrying about changing vocab from the question here. There's not much time to do that. It's best to kind of focus on the question, and then afterwards you can explain it a bit more. So that's the first sentence, but again, that's not enough. We need to explain a bit more. So we have a second sentence. Second sentence was this. People can already buy fantastic home viewing equipment, but it still feels more special to share the experience of watching a new film with a theatre full of people. Again, we can see this second sentence is going into a bit more detail. It's a slightly longer sentence explaining things a bit more. We often need to do this if it's explaining something a bit complex. We need a longer sentence. But again, it's kind of explaining what we can do now. We can buy great or fantastic home viewing equipment, but that it actually feels more special to go to the cinema. Full of people, right? A theatre full of people. So it explains why the cinema feels better than watching something at home. This is actually explaining the present. So we need to go on a bit more and have another sentence explaining in a bit more detail that we're still answering the question about the future. So we have this third sentence after this. I don't think that technology will be able to replicate that cinema atmosphere. So here you can see the word will again, because we're referring to the future. We're not sure, of course, so it's just an opinion. We use the word think again. But we don't think that it will be able to be the same at home as it is in the cinema. It won't be able to replicate or copy the cinema atmosphere, the feeling of being in a real cinema. So we've just gone through 3 steps there. We don't actually have a specific example here, but we've just got 2 steps to the explaining. And I feel like that is long enough. We've answered the question. We haven't gone into too much detail and gone off topic. We've focused our answer. Sometimes I think if people give 5, 6, 7 sentence answers, sometimes they lose focus. And this is kind of an appropriate length of answer here. A nice 3-sentence answer, going through 3 steps in a nice clear structure. So there we have it. That is 2 sample questions with 2 sample answers. This part of the test is challenging, but again, it's about preparing the skills that you need to show in this part of the test. That's what the examiner is looking for. They're not looking for a real depth of knowledge on a topic. You don't have to worry about thinking too much about what topics are going to come up. There are hundreds of topics that you could get. There's no way you can prepare for every possible topic. But there is a way to prepare for these types of questions. You can see that we've looked at a question that's comparing the present with the past and how something has changed since the past. If you can do this well about anything, whether it be films or something else, then you can show this skill and get a high score in the test. And the second question was asking you to predict. So predicting questions or speculating questions about the future is a very common thing that you'll have to do in part 3 of the test. But again, it doesn't really matter what the topic is. No one knows the future. No one has knowledge about what is going to happen in the future for sure. Nobody really knows. But it's about being able to explain what you think about the future clearly. And if you can do that about any topic, then you're going to do well in this part of the test. You can see here the examiner is really testing that you can use different verb forms flexibly and not have to try too hard to do this. But in order to be able to do that, you have to practice. So thinking about different types of questions on different topics that ask you to do these 2 things, compare the past and the present, and to predict the future with any number of topics. And if you practice it, then you're going to improve this skill. So there we go. We've gone through these 2 questions and 2 answers. I hope again that this video was useful for you, and now you have a bit of a better idea about what to expect in part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. If you did find the video useful and you enjoyed it, then don't forget to click the like button. And also, if you want to see more videos similar to this, obviously you can look at previous videos, but don't forget to click the subscribe button so you see any future videos on similar topics, on the speaking part of the test, but also other parts of the test. We'll be looking at the writing, the reading, and the listening. So there we have it. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you again in the next video.